difference in their budget from last year to this year. Could be simply capital, or it could be operating, or it could be something else. They are here, they can represent their departments, and they can speak up if you have questions. Otherwise, Patricia and Devin will have that. Do any of you need, I know Lori, you had the agendas on the desk, right? So we also have agendas here if anyone needs a copy. I'm not sure they do, Devin, but they'll need the PowerPoint.
So the packet that Devin is handing out has the strategic plan information that the departments use. It has copies of the PowerPoint presentation, and it has copies of the preliminary budget information that's being presented tonight.
Okay, thank you, Patricia. Go for it.
So what you're looking at tonight is just to give you a real picture of what our budget would look like before any changes are made. So the revenues right now are just under 63 million, but the expenditures are just under 79. So if we were to actually spend that much, it would be using up our reserves, which is not advisable at this time. So we know there's some work to be done before we come back with the proposed, but we didn't want to try to do any of that before allowing you to look at it, because this is what the requests from each department represent, so that you can see what those capital costs are, and you can see the full where we're at right now with what the departments feel they're going to need to be able to continue to provide the services at the current level of service. This just gives a summary of what the total of all funds for revenues, the funds forward, expenditures, and reserve balance, looking at FY21 actuals, FY22 actuals, FY23 year to date, and FY24 preliminary look at the information. And if you will notice on that second to last line, with no change to this, we would be using about 16 million out of reserves. This slide is the estimated ad valorem.
So in your packet are these slides so that you can follow along. Couple packets back that Devin just handed you, sorry. Look to the packet Devin just handed you and just pull out your slides so you can follow along, write notes. So we're on slide number 4, packet page, another packet.
So we received the preliminary estimates from Brevard County Tax Assessor, and that's the information that you can see in the calendar year 2023 for fiscal year 24 budget. Typically, before that's finalized, there'll be some changes to that number, but the estimates tend to be fairly close to what that final number will be. Current net new taxable value was 11 million, which last year it was 15 million. The overall taxable value has changed from last year to this year by about $231 million. So if you look at its line 1, 2, 3, 4, where it says adjusted current taxable value, that is the value of property values throughout the city that our ad valorem taxes are calculated on.
On the second line, you're showing a deficit of 3 million.
It's just the difference between last year and this year. And all that's representing is last year there was a larger increase in new taxable value than this year.
Oh, okay.
It's not a decrease, it's just the
Okay.
difference is, we just had less increase in taxable
Okay,
value.
thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah. Yeah, that last column is just the change from last year to this year.
So again, remember that when something's built in the city or any place, it's based on the CO.
Yeah.
And again, so some of these, the dates and so forth of when an item is completed, so it may begin in 1 year and it may seem like it's gonna hit our tax, but it doesn't hit our taxes for 2 or 3 years. So some of these are things that may have been started being built 2 or 3 years ago and they just finished the CO during this particular time period, which would have been this past year.
And as the mayor would say, this is a lagging indicator.
It is.
Yeah. And how that then looks on the revenue side is for the general fund, about 1.3 million additional tax revenues to the general fund and about 114 additional tax revenues to the CRA. And that's those blue lines. So the blue lines break out the tax revenue based on general fund and to the CRA, the tax incremental financing. So these are, and I'll go through these a little bit quickly because you do have them in your printouts, but the next few slides are the slides from the different departments to kind of give you an overview of what's happening within their specific department.
Would you go back one, please?
Of course.
I just think it's important for that bottom line figure. That's money that's coming to us from the appreciation in our CRA.
Yeah. Yes.
So we're doing pretty well.
And
That money
And it-
that would have gone to the county.
when we began our CRA, I don't have that right
That
here
piece
with
of
me,
it.
but if you recall, those tax revenues to the CRA were only a couple $100,000 when we first started. So there's been a significant change in the value of that CRA area.
Well, I think you can look at the number 762 and 22, 23, and 877 in the 23 for 24, right? If I read that up there correctly. The current year TIF. So again, we talked about that last year that the TIF has grown year over year. Again, we're limited and from a debt perspective, we can't pay that off early, but we are seeing more money in the CRA.
And Mayor, you were pointing out that, not the 114,000, you were pointing out that 877,000.
Correct. Thanks.
So your department has grant opportunities to some of our local businesses. In addition, the city commission sponsors some special events. Including the Friday Main Street Party and the art show.
So I asked that Karen put this in your slides, just so that you all would see this, especially since we have 2 new commissioners, and this may not have been something you were aware of, and you may have known a little bit. Again, it just is a good reminder to explain what your line items consist of within your budget, so, or what our in-kind happen to be, as well as these. So we talked a little bit about, I think on here, Freedom 7 was the one before that, or one after this. So we've got, there you go. So we got Freedom 7, we've got a history of that one. We're at 25,000 again, so again, just so that we have included them in the budget. We know that, you know, they utilize this facility, they'll utilize the city hall if continues to be the plan going forward, but that's in the budget. If you back up one, I think we've got, I'm sorry, Patricia, I was going everywhere. The budget history there on, it's just hard to read it, Friday Fest, okay. So we do have the 10,000 in there for Main Street. We did change, last year they had the 30, actually, I think 30,000 year before. Last year, in the current year, we're in 10,000. And then we have in this year's budget 10,000. So again, those are the numbers we have in the budget. We typically would ask that Kenny or somebody from Main Street would come out and present to you at the July work session or another one thereafter the need for the money, and you would be able to answer questions or ask questions at that point in time, and we'll extend that to her for the 18th of July or the August meeting. So, but right now there is a 10,000 holding spot in that line item. And then as Patricia went forward on the fireworks, again, this is just something that I've heard a lot of conversation about over the last year and a half, and so we are finishing up kind of a one-year contract this upcoming year. This past year, we finished up the prior 3-year contract, if I'm not mistaken. Again, we put 20,000 in for this next year because 10 just really, we didn't get what we needed for the 10,000, and we knew we were going to struggle with that based on the contract. But again, it's up to you. If you wish to make those changes, that's definitely something we can do. And then the holiday decoration. So for a long time, we had nothing in some of our facilities or even in the downtown area or out at Fisher Park. So we put a few decorations. We put the tree and the lights and a couple of things. So that is a lease, basically a lease contract. So we have a company that comes out, we pay them, they store it, we don't have to keep it, we just put it, they put it up, we don't do anything. So we would like to light up the fire department and the police department. We did not get into, last year didn't get in time to arrange for that. So that's something we may think about this year, but that's what the holiday decor is. And then we put some money in there for our 100th. So we know that we'll approach that in 24. Do we need to plan on something next year? Again, that's up to you as commission if that's something you want us to adjust the dollar in 25. So it's in 25, but the money, we put some monies in 24 if we have to prepay to spend to be ready for 25. We know it's January 25. We hope to be in the city hall if that's the direction we end up going by that point in time. But again, if not, we still need to plan on some kind of celebration. So that's why you find those dollars in the budget. Marketing, again, those are things that we've done in the past. So we've kept those in the budget. We still need to continue. I think, I see Melissa's here. Melissa started us with some of these advertisements. They've been productive for us, and I think they work well. So we've kept those in the budget, and again, pretty simple on that side of it.
So human resources, one of the big projects that they had in this current fiscal year is moving from the old payroll system to a combined HR payroll system, and dealing with the challenges that was involved in that transition. So that whole process has been a huge endeavor by the HR and payroll staff. They're continuing to look at the minimum maximum wage requirements. They're continuing to look at succession planning, and they're continuing to look at the issue of competing for skilled labor. We work with the Career Source Brevard for attracting new talent, to have assistance with projects within the city, holding job fairs and trying to get our name out there as an employer. And they continue to work with our healthcare provider, trying to keep our rates low on the healthcare costs. If I recall, we are...
So under 5%, 4.9, I believe. Is that correct? Yeah. So a 4.9% increase on our health, which we were happy with. So it's pretty common during this time to hear, well, it's going to be double digits, and then they'll come back and adjust it accordingly. But this year they realized that we could sign a contract earlier if they just made the commitment to reduce the rates right up front, and they've done that.
I have a question on this slide, Mayor.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Patricia, where it says, continue to streamline processing using Paycom platform for payroll and HR, and then it says HR onboarded 131 new hires
They've been very busy.
in this past year.
And it's a combination. It's a combination of staff changes, but also every year we do seasonal hires for leisure services as well. So that's a combination of the seasonal that happens every single year, as well as just staff.
So
turnover.
it's lifeguards, camp workers.
Yeah.
Which are
Which-
quite a few numbers there, but they didn't come back from the year before. Or even if they terminated at the end of the season and then they came back, they're still considered a new hire?
Still part of that process.
Okay. And then when you say adding 3.5 FTEs for FY '24, those aren't necessarily in the HR department. Those are just overall?
Proposed for the 2024 budget, and it is multiple departments. It's development services, water reclamation.
Yeah, okay. I'm just like, we're getting a new process and streamlining. It says streamline processing in HR, and then we're adding 3.5 employees. That's why I wanted to ask that question.
I think our HR director would love it if you guys approved for her to hire 3.5 people in her department, but she's not actually asking.
Okay, I just want to point out that those 3.5 aren't in HR.
They are not.
Okay.
She could probably use the help, but they are not. Yeah. City clerk. FOIA, is that records
Just
request?
FOIA.
So, our city clerk stays busy with the records requests that come through her to almost every single department. Time consuming, to say the least. And of course, the agenda packets that they put together and working with the departments that need maybe some more assistance in finding records so that they have the proper information to bring to you and making sure that the packets are put together correctly.
So as far as chartmanships go, on your left side, you start at 0, and on the right side, you start at 75. So that makes that 84 number look like really low from last year. If it was from 0, it would be right up there close to 100 and make it look kind of even. It looks like a really big jump.
But it isn't.
Yeah, okay.
We give you very little breaks.
You
Keep
just
you
want
guys
me to use
busy.
my head, huh?
It's two different topics, that way.
Finance department, we bring you your annual budgets, we bring you annual financial reports. Our next commission meeting will be bringing you quarterly financial reports, and thereafter you'll be getting monthly and quarterly. So we're pretty excited to start doing that. Investment reports, so you can see how we're trying to help the cash reserves grow. And we process, of course, all of your invoices, payments to our vendors, payments to our employees. IT, information technology, they are what keeps this place running, and we keep them running. They didn't put it on here, but I would guess their help desk tickets, the requests for help from them probably grows a lot with every year. And part of that is just the fact that we continue to grow with our needs in the technology area. But it's just software now is their responsibility. Even when it's in the cloud, it still requires our IT guys to make sure things are running and the contracts are correct. They also have to be here to make sure that our communications are up and functioning in the event of any kind of natural disaster. They really never get to sleep.
Does this include the software for the Airbnbs that we're gonna switch to, or is that in?
That's in the current year. That's actually in Fund 136 in General Fund for the current year, and then there'll be additional in future years will be out in the IT if there's a maintenance.
So this year will be in general fund?
Yes,
future years
because
will
of
be
the-
in IT. What
right.
about, weren't you proposing to change the, was it accounting software?
The accounting software will be as a capital, you've got that as a capital outlay?
We have put that into the fiscal year 25 capital CIP, because even if we made a decision today, it won't happen for, I mean, one of the vendors that we spoke to said if we signed a contract today, it would be a minimum of 18 months before that rolled out. It's such a huge undertaking to get all that information converted and to get everything set up and run parallel.
So that, a lot of times those costs for those software packages or whatever it might be will be in capital.
Yeah.
Then it becomes maintenance under IT. So we've tried to get that flow working, that if it's new in the department for that year, and then it moves into IT after that.
And that's a new, not new, but it's a GASB, Government Accounting Standards Board requirement that effective fiscal year 23, that we show the acquisition of software as a capital, and then the subsequent years it shows as an operating. Public safety. Looks like they're saying that they're replacing an old system that's costing the city $96,000 with a new system that will cost them $30,000. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Wes, that this is dispatch software that is GPS based. So not only is it less expensive, it's also far more accurate about sending the emergency response folks to the right place. So our police department, their goals is to provide a safe city and to make sure we have enough officers out on the road to ensure that it's safe. It's a lot of gear involved in making sure they have the tools, from their vehicles to their computers to their weapons. In addition, they also have to maintain records for any kind of court cases that must come up. So, a lot going on down there.
So let me give you a little history on the police department. So as you see there, then 2023, we went from 5.7 to 5.5. So there was a reduction in the operating. Again, some of the things we may have had in last year's budget for radios and guns and so forth, it could have been a little different than where they're at this year. If you look over in communications, you see it went from 960 to 1.3. Again, we are required by the sheriff to change out our radios this year. It's a chunk of change coming out of communications for that. So there's a hardware, or they call it a backbone requirement. And again, PD, you can always speak up if I misspeak to this. But that's a huge requirement for us this year, as well as the purchase. And you'll see the same purchase in fire department of the radios. So those will be our in-car. There's also an upgrade to the handhelds that you carry. We have to get them to P25, M25.
Yeah, hi, Wes Mullins, Deputy Police Chief. P25 compliant is what we have to get it to, and that includes all of our pack sets, which is our handhelds, and the in-cars. Some of the radios that we currently had have to actually be purchased new because they're not even upgradable to get this new encryption requirement, this P25 compliance. That's being pushed to us through the county, but through the county to FDLE, the state, and the federal government. So we have to be encrypted by a certain date. The county has established that date, and we're trying to get as compliant as we can. So we have our in-car radios that we use. We have our handheld radios that we use. The fire department has their handheld radios that they use, and they have their in-car radios that they use in their fire vehicles. And I think 200 plus radios, I think, is what we have, 211-ish,
Right.
plus or minus. That's how many radios we currently carry.
And we pay a portion to the county, so, you know, they actually are the buyer of everything, and then they basically say, here's your portion, every city, for the next 3 years or 5 years. I don't recall the exact year of the number for the contract. We signed the contract last year, so that was our commitment.
Right.
So they sent us, I think it was early summer. that
Yeah, it was
they-
October, I think, or late, yeah, and they essentially told us, hey, now we have a drop dead date, and if you're not done at this drop dead date, you are cut off on the radio systems.
So, does that encryption requirement apply to parking enforcement and beach
Yes, sir.
rangers?
Yes, sir, parking beach rangers, anybody who is
Okay.
CJIS certified, yes, sir.
Okay.
And then the increase on the beach rangers there from the 168 to 220. Remember, last year we increased to the 168. We increased hours because we put more beach rangers, again, for more hours and more consistent schedule versus the prior year. So again, we stretched that out again this year. We kind of phased it in a little bit last year, and the final phase should be this year. 8-ish number of beach rangers, is that correct?
Well, we have 8 spaces, but we're using 6 for the hours. We're giving everybody 24 hours, and it's, up until recently, it's helping us keep them instead of having to rotate and keep hiring new folks all the time. They prefer a set schedule with a set amount of hours rather than certain weeks we'll have 12, certain weeks they'll get 18 hours. We just prefer to give them a set schedule like our parking enforcement have. And we find that that tends to keep them on longer, so we don't rotate them out.
So why did I'm just curious, in the code and parking enforcement, it actually goes down, well, code, I guess you have to add both those numbers to get to the 2023 number, but it looks like it's
95K less.
right about the, let's see,
Still less.
it's still less, and I thought we were, the code enforcement officer we just added, wouldn't that fall into that budget?
So-
So I'm just kind of curious why it,
We separated out. For 24, we're actually separating the two into separate divisions to better track it, so that you can clearly see what portion is code enforcement versus parking enforcement. In addition, an FTE was moved out of code enforcement and back to development services. So the change you're seeing there for 24 is really, that decrease is moving a full position out of code enforcement and back to development services.
But
that-
for short-term rental.
is that is that our current, long-term?
No, sir, Robin is still with us, if that's who you're talking about.
Okay, so
Yeah.
somebody else that was working with Robin, is going back to
Development
development
services.
services. And
Yes,
we're
sir.
adding a half a head or so to the budget.
But that addition is actually in the 23 budget. So it's from 23 to 24 that you see that
Okay.
reduction
So
from the
did
move.
is the parking proposed, the 191, is that a reduction from 2023 or is that an increase?
I don't know. I don't, I'd have to look at
Well, thanks for
23 to break
being
it out.
honest. I don't want you to ad lib. We'll get to that if we
I
need to
mean,
in
I
the
can
future.
look at it because
You don't have to
I-
look at it right now.
I
Thank you.
know what those numbers are, I just don't have it here
Right,
tonight.
well, when you tell me that you took a full head out of code, and then you add the numbers up, it makes more sense that they're lower than what it looks like on the chart.
We're also getting rid of the FT, and we're doing one part-time on each side as well, from police and building, one part-time code and another part-time code.
For
as well.
VRBOs.
For the VRBOs, that was the vacation rentals that you
Right,
mentioned,
right,
Commissioner.
right.
Yes, sir.
Right, but that's still under code.
Yes, sir.
That's just how they're charging, that's not two separate individuals.
But it still falls
Part-timers,
under
two
that number.
part-timers.
Okay.
It still falls under that number.
And Robin, we had talked about the beach rangers, how many are able to actually write citations?
All of them.
All of them?
Yes, sir.
Good. Just wanted to clarify that.
Finally got there. Okay, next slide.
The fire department, in the '23 budget, they actually separated out their emergency medical services and their community paramedic program, so that when you are looking at your numbers now, you can see the difference between the fire operations, the emergency medical services, and the community paramedic program, which is why the historical data has only got the 2 years for those two, because they're new. This year, thank you to last year, the commission approving us to apply for a SAFER grant. Our firefighters will now be running their engines with more individuals, and they won't need to be pulling their tower truck out every time they need to respond to a basic call. It gives them an opportunity to reduce their overtime hours because they're fully staffed as well. So while that SAFER grant covers 100% of the salaries and benefits for a 3-year period, it does not cover bunker gear. To cover the bunker gear, to get them fully able to perform the service, would have been the option for $175.50. We have applied for a grant for the bunker gear, but 18 months later, 20 months later, we still haven't had a response. Not negative, not positive. So we are still standing by, still hoping that we'll receive those grant funds.
Is the reduction in operations just shifting hours over to the EMS? Is that why there's a reduction in operations and an upper in the?
Yeah.
I don't, you have to look at it, but I don't.
Yes.
Tricia, okay.
Yes, the overall budget has only changed by the operational increases in total. These amounts that have been split out just came out of their operation and just moved over.
We had talked about the county shifting the lifeguard expense. And you saw that coming last year when they were asking for those
Right.
numbers on our parking.
And I have received a letter from the county manager, Tom Abate, and, Frank Abate, Tom's in Titusville. Frank Abate, he indicated the cost for the city of Cocoa Beach. I'm going to say it was right in that $300,000 range for us to take over the towers, but I really would like to sit down with the fire chief and Justin. They know that operation. I cannot speak to the operation. They need to be the one to look at it and see if the number of towers that should be represented. Right now, we have 3 towers that we do pay for, $80,000 plus a year. So that 300 would include our summary of that 80, so it would be a difference about 220. But they need to look to see if that's enough stands, lifeguard stands, and then we need to look at that. But that's definitely something the county, I do not believe, will be requesting that we accept a MOU next year. They're going to expect us to pay for that service. And that's something we need to think about. Is that something we can, currently, a lot of cities use their parking fees or a portion of their parking fees. We already use our parking fees for fire and police and other things, but that's an option. Or, again, it's something we'll have to think about. Again, we've got one more year cycle to look at that, but.
I got another option for you, Mayor. If TDC's bringing all these people here that
I'm
need
with
to
you.
be taken care of on the beach,
Yeah,
how come they can't use that money?
that's why we
To
have
pay
a
for
lobbyist
lifeguards.
that's looking into that, because that, I mean, I don't see anybody not coming here if they had to pay $1 to stay in a hotel room, if it was used for public safety. I mean, obviously, we've gotten pushback from the
Well,
tourism industry.
what's the best avenue besides just chatting about it here to actually move that forward?
Talking to our lobbyists is the only way it's gonna even remotely.
The lobbyists are at the state level, not the county level.
Yeah, I'm talking about getting it changed at the state level so we can have a local bed tax like Panama City does.
So the letter actually addressed from the county manager states that tourism dollars should, in theory, pay for this, but they're not extending an olive branch, so to speak, to ask that tourism pay. They're gonna leave that up to us to all fight that. So I think League of Cities on the local level might be able to be one piece that we can utilize at the lobbyists, but I agree, I mean, our lobbyists, we can bring them here over the summer, ask that they come in and start preparing for that, because the session will begin, I believe, this year in October.
Well, besides the negative press of any drowning in Cocoa Beach, and people swim where there aren't lifeguards, and there's, believe it or not, there's rip currents where there aren't lifeguards in Cocoa Beach. But, you know, the negative press from one ought to go against TDC for not funding the lifeguards. And therefore, I would think if they want to keep bringing people here to fill beds, that they would want to keep them safe.
You would think.
I mean, whose head do we got to get that through?
TDC, I mean, but at state level, so there are requirements, their state, my understanding, they're standing on the statute that allows them to not fund any more than what they have, which has been a very small portion with the county on the lifeguards. So we have to go to the state level. It has to be state legislators.
Okay.
Use your advertising budget to shame them.
There's certainly the port, you know, is inviting, they're gonna be at 6 million passengers that they wanna put through.
Well, I mean, you know, right now, I guess it sounds like the burden to the city would be $300,000 a year, which is, you know, a life is worth more than $300,000 a year, so we gotta maintain the lifeguards. But is it something that, does it sound like you were gonna take the lead and work with the lobbyists?
Our lobbyists, yes, so they're in this, finishing up the current session, so that this summer they'll come out, they'll meet with us, and they'll take on those new challenges or, you know, whatever you ask them to go forth and look into, and that can definitely be one of
Should
them.
there be, should there be like a strategy session with the commission and the lobbyists?
There typically is, yes, sir. There's usually, you bring them out and they'll sit down and listen to you and your concerns, and they'll.
I'd like to have one for, I mean, yeah, they're doing stuff up there, and yeah, maybe, I don't know, did the governor sign off on our 1.5 million for the city?
I don't believe he signed the budget yet, but it's still in there. All of our money's still in there.
So,
Okay.
you know,
July.
I would like to, you know, it might as well be a joint meeting, so we don't have to do individuals.
Yes, July. I'll try to set something up for the July meeting.
I think I've got somebody who wants to make a comment. It's a work session, so I don't, you know, this is loosey-goosey.
There is another avenue. There's a 5-cent bed tax that is allocated a certain way, so we can't get it for public safety. They've been doing that for years. However, the state allows the county to apply another 1 cent, up to 6 cents. So if we were to lobby our county commissioners, I don't know how effective it'll be, lobby them to increase the bed tax by 1 cent for a sole purpose of public safety, you can do that. And so that's how you can raise it up, and then the public safety would be divided into the cities that are providing the public safety. So there is another avenue besides going to the state and trying to get the state to change, is trying to get our commissioners, our county commissioners, to allow us 1 cent more. The hoteliers would go for it. Your hospitality people would go for it, because that would take the burden off of them having to come up with some money, because eventually they're gonna have to come up with some money too. They can't expect the city to do the full expense of it.
Just to clarify, Melissa, you're not talking about a half cent or a 1 cent increase on sales tax?
No, I'm talking about a 1 cent increase on the bed tax. It's right now 5%, you kick it to 6%. You can go,
1%, not 1 cent.
but it ends up to be about 1 cent. When you figure it out in the taxes, it ends up to be about 1 cent of it. So, but that is a way that other counties have done it. They have increased the bed tax.
Challenges the county thinks our 2 change million covers our $13 million public safety. I'm not sure if they're math challenged or they just don't understand that, but there's not a giant pot of money in the parking to cover that, so.
I will make
But, I mean,
arrangements.
I mean, everything's on the table wherever we can get it, but I think we're gonna be better off trying to get to Tallahassee.
Development services, still in the CRA, projecting to use 1.6 million, either in fiscal year '23 or to carry that forward into fiscal year '24, depending on the ability to complete before the end of the fiscal year. This is a positive thing for your CRA. We do not and should not be accumulating a large reserve balance on your CRA, because the whole intent of that fund is to provide opportunities and to provide improvements to your CRA area. So this is a very good way. The new Development Services Director, Tanja McCoy, has several ideas for the fiscal year '24 budget on how to further use some of these available funds, because as you saw, that we'll be adding another almost 800,000 to that revenue stream for '24. Am I done?
You got 30 minutes.
And what's the debt service on that, Robin? What do we pay? Or
The debt service is, what, about
4 and change?
250, 300 a year, I think.
I was thinking 323, but you
I
might
thought
be
it was
right.
3 and change, or
Yeah.
closer to 4.
Yeah, right around there. The parking revenue at the garage does pretty well at generating sufficient revenue to cover the full cost of that annual debt, without even getting into the ad valorem. And until this year, there weren't even personnel costs. This year, we hired a half-time maintenance person to deal with issues at the parking garage. And there's a request to increase that position to full-time in '24, especially with bringing on with the new city hall and the cultural green space. They'll be able to keep and maintain that area as well.
Mayor, the principal's 280 and the interest is 122.
I thought it was like 400, right?
No,
280
280 for the principal. What did I
and
just-
120?
And 122 for the interest.
By 2,000.
That's what's posted in the budget.
That's 400. All right, thought it was 400.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Next slide.
Public Works, a lot of capital projects going on in the Public Works. In addition, they have a lot of maintenance that they do throughout the city. One of their focuses recently this year, prior years as well, but especially this year and the upcoming fiscal year, is streets and doing some repair work on our streets.
Those numbers on the left-hand side, those are all in just actual dollars?
No, I think he rounded them into millions.
Yeah, it should say that.
Says thousands.
Oh, it does say thousands up there in parentheses.
Got it, sorry, thank you,
I
Bob.
was like, huh? Okay. All right, thank you.
Public Works, of course, is also responsible for the maintenance of all of our facilities. The grounds throughout the city, the city-owned grounds are all maintained by the Public Works Department, and all your fleet vehicles, it falls under this department. This gives you information on your fleet.
So it looks like we're dropping some sedans, we're picking up some pickups and SUVs.
I will mention that there's a notable increase in the cost of new vehicles for the '24. Leisure Services, under the Leisure Services Department is your beachside parks, it's the aquatic center, the tennis courts, this golf course, and the rec center. He has got,
The skate park's in there, right?
Skate
Please,
park,
I mean, it's
yep.
in there. Okay.
Yep, and I believe in the 24 budget right now, we've added to, add on a, what is it, BMX for,
So the half pipe on the skate park and the BMX is just potential, but it's 200,000 because we don't have a real quote yet.
Did you get a quote for the park, skate park? Or,
That was, we had the 90 originally, but with the city or the engineer that's looking at that, the plans or the specs needs to validate whether or not that 90 would take care of the true, needs, if it really does meet it from a structural perspective. so.
was that replacing the coping and everything for the 90? Okay.
But did not include the improvement of the half pipe. So again, we're still waiting.
we replaced the courts this year. We've replaced the heater unit at the pool. He's had quite a few capital projects, both planned and budgeted for, as well as unexpected emergency replacements and repairs to structure and equipment.
On the tennis courts, didn't we say 200 from the USDA and then matching it with 180 of ours? Is that full 380 in here or just the 180?
I don't think the 200's in there. We haven't added it into the budget yet, have we, Wayne? We didn't add the 200 we didn't reflect that at all at this point.
So if
Or
we
the 180.
don't- I mean, that was a topic on the last commission. If they
Yes.
don't go that route, that could be an upper to this if we're gonna do that same scope.
I think Wayne can tell you, what's the cost of one court, Wayne?
In the $55,000 to $58,000 range.
Right.
So we can put some money in there to make some improvements for sure out of our budget if we don't accept that 200 for sure.
Water reclamation. For both your water reclamation and your stormwater divisions, they have had significant increases to their capital budgets in response to the direction for the strategic plan session. Part of the 16 million delta between the proposed expenses and the proposed revenues fall into these two departments. The water treatment plant has about 9.7 million in capital projects, which, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, we're gonna have to make decisions on how we're gonna handle that. The same is true with the stormwater. So a large portion of that delta between the revenue and the expenditures are directly related to these capital projects in the general fund, but in large part in the utilities fund and the stormwater funds. There are a lot of projects that the utility plant has going on currently, as well as in proposed for FY24 and future years. The slip lining being one of them. A lot of that, the funds for that came through grants, but not all of it. And it doesn't address all of the pipes that need to have slip lining done. This is just kind of a summary overview of that rehabilitation history and the work that's been done at your plant.
Those pictures were the ones that Representative Thad Altman just praised Brad on, because he had never seen, someone had never shown him a broken pipe and then what a slip line looked like. And he was so impressed that Brad, give him kudos, to show a picture of what we're trying to correct. So it was kind of a funny meeting when the representative mentioned that.
Commissioner Williams, you were here when we got that video.
Yeah.
Not something pleasant to look at.
Didn't smell good.
So just to give you kind of a summary overview, you can see that in past years, the capital has been much smaller compared to what's in the requested 24. And again, that is in response to the capital projects that were identified during the strategic planning session. The issue with stormwater is the ramp road continues to be a large project. So estimated for '24 is $750. Cedar Woodland Brevard improvements are $750 for '24. And then there's a couple of smaller ones in there. The real problem with the stormwater is they haven't had a rate increase since 2015. So the user fees have not kept pace with the costs of the capital.
Didn't we just authorize the increase?
Utilities,
Didn't that include?
that's sewer treatment, sewer and reuse.
Oh,
Yeah, sewer and reuse
that's
charges.
stormwater.
So this is the stormwater charges.
Can you go to the other slide you had up? Right there? So, just to point out, there's and it's not guaranteed, and there's a caveat there, that out of that 1.897 million, there's a potential for $1.4 million to come back from grant funding, but we can't guarantee that.
We cannot, until the,
So what you're saying is, to do the work that needs to be done, we need to commit the funding, but we also need to aggressively work toward getting the grants.
correct. So a lot of the storm,
His head and
yeah, a lot of our stormwater and
Walker
utilities,
Dawson, are you nodding your head back there?
a lot of our stormwater and utility projects are grant eligible or potentially eligible for state appropriations. But knowing that they're eligible, applying for them is no guarantee that we'll be
Right, but
recipients.
then there's the Sorrel money and other things that there's potential, so.
Yes,
So I challenge you, Walker, to bring back at least 700,000 of that 1.4.
So we will accept that challenge and hopefully come through. Walker Dawson, Stormwater Utility Manager. I will say, I love the soil program. The contract value that stormwater projects have received, at least since I've been here with the city, have been underwhelming, and some to the point to where the dollar amount was so low, we didn't even enter the contract because it would have cost us more administratively than it was actually worth. So Sorrel does have good funding. It's a great funding source. What we have seen here historically at the city, they typically don't come with a large chunk of change. But with that being said, you know, with the governor's executive order this year, there's a lot of money related to water quality and resiliency that's available, at least hopefully through the end of this administration. So we will be pursuing grants.
Thank you.
No problem.
And we have the master plan, of course. I think Walker could speak to that. The master plan was finished in '21, and that's really what we're trying to implement is the stormwater master plan. That's the focus of our stormwater program.
Yeah, so the CIP projects that you see, more specifically Ramp Road and Cedar, they were identified in the 2021 Stormwater Master Plan update that was adopted by the commission. St. Lucie Lane slip lining, that was one of those, our infrastructure's old. We noticed failure in the road. Upon repair of the roadway, it was clear that we had a separating pipe, so East St. Lucie Lane, which is about 600 feet of 36-inch stormwater line, needs to be slip lined. That also cascades over into Public Works, which has East St. Lucie Lane slated to be paved next year. Can't pave the road until we repair the pipe. So that's where we're at. And but these projects weren't fun projects that we just came up with, said, hey, let's spend a bunch of money. They were in the Stormwater Master Plan. And also with, you know, the strategic plan that we outlined for the stormwater program.
And then we recognize also SRF loans are available for these programs at somewhere's under 3% right now in the 2 range, 2.7, 2.5, 2.7. So again, we can apply for the grant for SRF loans. If we receive a grant, we can cancel an SRF loan, but it's timing of everything.
It's
So,
still cheap money.
It's still very cheap money, yes, sir.
Just on I thought Cedar was like the cost shocked me, Walker, we talked about this, because that's been a ongoing issue of flooding.
So I will also caveat this, these are FY '24 prices. There's additional monies, especially for Cedar Woodland Brevard in FY '25, because I think the cursory cost estimate that we received, which was slightly higher than I would have expected, was on the order of over 6.5 million. It's not a small project, so it's a pretty substantial undertaking.
And definitely one we'll take to our lobbyists again, another opportunity for them, but again, also opportunity with the SRF loans.
And Robin, on the Ramp Road, I know we had looked at parking. I still like that idea of trying to put meters there. And if you have a sticker, you can use it.
No free parking, anywhere on the beach.
We could definitely bring that back to you too, so.
I don't really like it, but I kind of feel like there should be some places for people to go that don't have to pay.
Bicentennial.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So I handed out just some things that you might have had questions about, trying to answer them. Kind of that first block on here gives you just a little bit of an overview of ad valorem between last year and the estimates for this year, including what a percentage change that represents. So really, when you look at kind of those last 3 lines in that first block, and it talks about the general fund tax collections, comparative between the current estimate and last year. At 1.3 million, it seems like a lot of money, but it really represents just a tiny bit over 9%. And a little bit later, kind of on the page 2 of this, on the 4th block, I've kind of captured some categories of operating expenses and how those have increased, or in case of the FY '24 proposed, and some of those we tried to decrease them. But there's just a lot where you'll see the significant change is in maintenance costs and in supplies. Just the overall cost of obtaining the supplies to conduct the business of providing services has gone up well over 9%. Now, these expenses are inclusive of all the funds, general fund, utilities, and stormwater, but it's just to give you kind of that big picture look of what's happening, what's driving those expenses up in the budget. So staff are trying to cut, they are trying to keep those costs down, they're trying to remove anything that they can, but it comes to a point where you can't perform the service if you cut more out of that operating. And we can't control what we're being charged.
Two things, just go back to page 1.
Yeah.
The reserve, that's just been a hang-up of mine for a while. We're only maintaining 2 months. I mean, I really think we need to revisit that and increase that. I mean, given the length of time it takes to get FEMA money back post-storm event, I mean, we were over 2 years before we got Irma money back.
On a good time.
Yeah,
When it's gone really well. So our
Busy
ordinance.
storm season, we need to put some money aside.
Our ordinance states 17%, and we are in compliance. But the concern is when you use up too much of your reserves in a single year, you put yourself in an untenable position because you might not have sufficient to draw on if an emergency does happen. So you could be at that 17% and be compliant. It doesn't mean that you're prepared, as you pointed out, to weather something. If it was really serious, like what happened just recently down south, 17% isn't going to be enough.
And just again, on that note, looking down on that page, as our financial advisor pointed out, liquidity is viewed favorably by rating agencies and financial institutions for lower borrowing rates. So, i.e., if we have a large capital project for public works, we're better off borrowing that money in SRF if we can't get it all grant funded at under 3%. Keep the money in reserves. We're making over 5%. We're making 3% on the money. It's just smart to do that.
In addition, the way that SRF works, it's you spend the money and you submit for reimbursement, and the ending loan itself is only the cost of the project. That's all it is. So you don't just say, well, I think the project is going to cost $1.5 million, and then it turns out it's $1.2 million, but you need to pay $1.5 million debt. SRF doesn't work that way. It is just the amount of the final project.
It's just like personal. Banks love to lend money to people that don't need it. So,
But the
Very
SRF
simple.
doesn't work that way. But we have that same kind of concern in your general fund. Well, it will be in the general fund as we transfer money to the capital improvement fund to cover the cost of City Hall. So using cash reserves, and we've talked about this, Jay has talked about this, we have a lot of options for how we can finance that without using capital reserves, cash reserves, but it isn't going to be enough to build the full cost of the City Hall without getting into the cash. And that's going to take about $4 million right out of your general fund reserves. So it's just something to be aware of. That cash coming out to build the City Hall, while it's available, and by using it, you're not dropping below that 17% minimum, but you get very close to it. And it also, I mean, right now, as you probably know, we can invest even on a six month. The last I saw from PFM was 5.65. Talking to Truist, I mean, we're looking at talking to our banker at Truist Bank, talking to Jay Glover, our financial advisor. We can probably get a revenue bond in the ballpark of between 4 and 4.5. So that delta between the 5.5 that we can invest and the 4.5 that will cost us is just lost money to us. And so it's leveraging what we have as wisely as we can, something for the commission to consider as they're moving forward with this budget. And the same is true with your stormwater, especially. He will go into a negative reserve balance if he does all of these projects, which we cannot do without a plan to rectify that over the upcoming year.
And those are all fixed rates if we're borrowing SRF loans? Yeah.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
we just take it off
Long-term
and
fixed rates.
pay it down with the cash.
It's a
we
state of
have.
Florida fund.
Yeah.
But
Investment returns go down,
The
we
re-
pay it off with cash.
if your returns go down,
Right.
then you would
Liquidate
be able to
your
pay it off?
reserves,
If
yeah.
you, with a early
Correct.
payoff, you'd be eligible for that?
Yep, that is correct. Matter of fact, a few years ago, we did exactly that. We had 2 SRF loans totaling just around $20 million for the utility plant upgrades, and we refinanced them under one loan with Truist Bank over the course of the loan. It didn't extend the length of the loan. We'll pay it off on the same time frame. But over that, it was just 1.5, little over 1.5 million that the city's going to save in interest. So absolutely, we can do that.
Because I mean, it's inevitable that the interest rates are not going to stay that
Right.
on CDs.
Yeah, Jay said perfect. We're in a weird arbitrage situation. So, yeah, let's take advantage of it.
City Manager, I got a question. I don't know if Patricia would answer it or whether Wayne would answer it.
Okay, let's let Patricia
Or you
try.
might be able to answer it.
Go ahead
It
and
was
answer.
kind of before your time.
Yes, sir.
We had this company come in and spend a lot of money on efficiency and air conditioning systems and new roofs and all this stuff, has that, and they owed us a kind of a warranty over a certain amount of time. Has that warranty period ended?
No, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it was a 10-year
Oh, I'm sorry,
period.
Bob, it was your question, it was a question to
I think
you?
it's another year.
Yeah,
Another year? And have we kind of done an internal audit to see if we got our bang for the buck out of that? Because they were telling us if we didn't get our bang for the buck, that, you know, they're gonna come back and do something, you know, help us out.
I think it was a performance contract, if I'm not mistaken, with ABM. They do those all over the state and.
Right, but I mean, we just kind of let them do their thing, and then we said, everything's good, but the
It had
reason they give you
caveats.
a warranty is we ought to have some way to internally audit, did we get our bang for the buck out of it?
so a few years back, Eileen did request that report. They charge us for it, believe it or not. But she did ask for it. I can dig that up.
No, I'm talking about currently versus, at least you have that report. Now you can say, okay, that's where you said we were at then. If we do something internally, if you have, city manager, if you have the staff and the time
Yes, sir?
to do something internally and see if they're missing the mark, and maybe we could get something back.
Right, because I believe it was between 74 to 115 we're paying a year. Does that sound right, Bob?
Could be 70.
Okay, is that, okay, Devin. So I don't know that we're seeing that in return, so definitely we'll look into an audit process on that.
I'm curious
sir.
what the cost was for that, for them to do it. It's kind of like the fox guarding the
Yes,
hen
I
house.
can ask that.
I wonder why.
I don't
We'll do the
remember.
audit, Like,
I don't remember off the top of my head, but it was a few thousand. It was
yeah,
surprisingly expensive for them to produce a report they should be just doing
Able
for
to
But
us.
then they're getting, the data is the data they
Skewed.
gather, you know, versus an independent
I'd
government estimate.
rather pay our CPA firm to do that. But,
Yeah, we can reach out to Yvonne too, so that's an option.
I mean, it's got to make sense. I mean, it's got to be less than.
Right.
Right.
It just seemed like a great idea. We all,
It was. We all thought it was.
The commission at the time voted for it.
I don't
We haven't had
know.
a lot of AC problems because they're all pretty new. But, you know, is it really giving us that energy efficiency and saving us money like they promised us?
I don't know if CRI does that, but I'll reach out to them because at least you know with CRI, it's going to be an unbiased audit.
Okay, just if everybody wants to give consensus to at least take a look at that.
Sure. Get a dollar number.
I'll ask, I'll inquire and come back, bring it back to city manager.
Because if there's a warranty
Yeah.
and we're not getting what they said we're gonna get,
They
then
said they would pay
I
us.
wanna
We would get our money back.
exercise our
This is a
warranty.
one-time sale, or this is ongoing every year?
No, no,
This is one
they
time
came
energy
and told
assessment.
us if
It's
they
every year.
do all these things, if, they came and told us if they do all
Yeah.
these things, that we're gonna save
Yeah.
all this money,
Sure.
which is actually gonna
Pay for
more
itself.
than pay for what we had done.
Right.
But we've also taken, of course, City Hall offline, so several facilities that were part of that originally now have come offline. So the replacement of that, the ACs and the units there, again, some upgrades and changes. You've got a new PD that wasn't as part of that, I don't think included in that originally, if I'm not mistaken. I don't think the PD was there.
It was not.
So we can look at all that, we can definitely have CRI
Right.
give us an estimate.
To their advantage that we tore down City Hall because they don't have to warranty those air conditioners anymore.
That is correct.
Or the roof.
The one that leaks like a sieve.
It leaks even worse now that it's not there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the things that staff will need direction from the city commissioners is the direction you want staff to go, especially with regards to the utility fund, the city hall construction, and the stormwater. Do you want them to defer projects to outlying years, or do you want us to go forward with finding debt proceeds to finance it, as in an SRF loan?
But I would prefer to take care of it. It's not going to get any better. I mean, we've been putting off and putting off and putting off for years. So that's my preference. I don't know what the rest of you guys are.
I agree with you, Ben. think we need to do it
Well,
now.
I think the city manager's opening comment was that you're gonna bring back a budget at the current millage rate.
We are.
And then Patricia, you would tell us what our options are to get our capital projects that we are desirable, whether we can do it in 24 or 25.
How the commission directs, the staff will do. If the commission says,
Well, give us our, I know you kind of gave us our options, but on the 18th of July, can you come back at, we have a budget on the current millage rate, and then we give us the options. You want to do the stormwater and those kind of projects first, or you want to do the city hall first, or,
you tell us.
well, yeah, but give us choices.
Well, that rate's gonna set the size of the box, right? And we're gonna determine which of those projects are in that box. And
Yeah, but that would only
25.
be for 24.
And the ones that are outside the box would kick to 25.
We have to.
Or
yes.
you would have to decide to take out a loan, and then we need to know what the encumbrance is on those loans to do those things earlier. And as the mayor would say, hate putting words in your mouth, the longer we wait, the more it's gonna cost on any of the capital improvement projects.
Yep.
So if
Again,
the construction costs and material costs are gonna go up 10% a year, and a loan's 5%, then you might wanna go ahead and do it now. But give us those options, tell us what fits and what doesn't fit, and what our options are to, be able to afford.
Does that Woodland project get covered, Robin?
So
And
I-
that's been a sore, just like, Blakey and the other streets in Cocoa Isles that have flooded for the last 15 years.
I think that's a good, that project is especially good contender for the state for appropriations. Our lobbyists liked that project this past year. If we could have, had more projects to submit, I think they would have taken that one on for sure. So I think we submit that for appropriations. I think in the meantime, again, we've got 750 in there for engineering, is that right?
For Woodland,
Yes.
300 for FY24.
Okay, so again, we need to go through and do the engineering anyway, so we'll put the money in for engineering for that piece of it. And then if there's other projects that need to be worked, as far as construction, engineering, construction, then we can look at those for SRF. But I think that's the contender for appropriations. And if we don't receive it, then obviously it would be something we go forth in the future year for SRF, but we really need to get through the engineering piece of this first, and because that's going to tell us the real dollars. Right now, we've got a rough estimate, but we don't have real dollar numbers yet. So we've got at best a ROM at this point in time. So, but I think that's one of the ones that, yes, we would want to include in the stormwater. I mean, stormwater's just really kind of come alive of recent with Walker in that position, and having between him and Jared in that division, it's able to really fulfill your needs and the citizens' needs of looking at everything that needs to be looked at as far as the outlet areas and clean out and operations. And again, he could speak to it, I can't, but we've done more in that division and have identified more because of the stormwater master plan than what I think we've done in many years. And you've got your rate study. So the rate study is going to come back and give you some relief, especially if you take that in consideration in August and you implement that rate study in January, you can actually get some relief to maybe do your engineering. I just don't know what the dollars will be. Reptilis is one of the firms that we've reached out to. They're performing the rate study. That's what they do, and they do it well. So you'll have a good presentation from them as to how to look at the funds for that. We hope to bring them in August to you.
Perfect.
Is there any way we can see what the budget looks like, not raising the millage rate like we're saying now, and then plus see what we get with raising it by 0.1 or something, and see what we can fit, how much we can fit in both levels, and compare and see what we want to cut? Is that a
We can give you anything you wish. If you want us to give you incremental dollar amounts that equal to an incremental millage rate, we can always tell you what that dollar is and provide that as information balanced at the current, and then provide that to you.
then we can see the difference of what capital projects we want to keep.
Sure.
And I'd like to see that.
Okay, we can provide that in the budget process.
Agree.
Do we want to do that for rollback rate too, so you have 3 points? low,
Well,
medium,
we did
high?
last year, so
Yeah,
we
let's
showed
do
all the
that, yeah.
numbers,
That way
yes.
we can, it's clear where the water line. where
We have to
the
show you
line is.
rollback because that's part of the requirement with our trim process that we have to go through,
I
so.
like rollback.
We don't have rollback rates yet.
No, I missed it.
Any other questions?
Anybody else?
I'm good.
It's my
Thank you.
presentation. Yep.
Yeah. By all means.
Just give me,
KP Thinker, 197 All Lane. Just a quick question. Slide number 1, so leave it on, seemed to be showing a revenue decrease of about 12 or 13 million. Why did that happen?
if you're talking about 2023 actuals,
Even before that, like the first slide that you showed.
So,
It went from 42 to 38.
so they're in,
So it goes from 42 to
38.
sorry.
43.
You seem to have a drop in money. Sorry, I read that as a
Right.
but
so in the original 23 budget, and even still in the amended a little bit, there were some projected short-term revenues that aren't actually going to come to fruition. And that was a combination of misinformation provided to the original consultant that the city worked with. And we've since changed consultants on that. They provided inaccurate information, so those estimates were not correct. And so there was a reduction in that way.
Was that for the Airbnb rental fees?
Uh-huh.
So 10% hit on revenue for that. That's
we made that amendment at mid-year so that we could recognize that right away.
The other component is largely in the Fund 310, which is the Capital Projects Fund. And that is because in the fiscal year 23, it was projected to have debt proceeds to cover the full cost. And that has changed for the FY24 budget. At this time, it's using all cash and no debt in this preliminary budget. So that changes the number considerably. The revenues just aren't there. It's using reserves. In the Fund 136, that's where you see that significant change between the estimates for FY23 and what we now know to be a more correct figure for both in terms of the short-term rentals that fall under that condo type, not condo, single-family resident, which is what the city has addressed as being the ones that need to collect the fees from, and it has significantly impacted the estimated revenues.
Also in 136, if you recall, last year, we did put in the budget, assuming that we would start collecting something from International Palms or Westgate. So preliminary, if we know the building's possibly going to begin, we put those numbers in there because there's a building permit fees collected. They haven't begun yet, so part of the adjustment each year will be those revenues, and into the next year, if we get a schedule from them that they're going to begin, then those building fees would be due. So in this next year, we hope to see Westgate and Weston at least begin, but and possibly some of the other projects that you all have been privy to and you're aware of. So we most likely will see some more real numbers for 136 this next year that we haven't seen up to now.
So 136 not Airbnb, it's general fund.
So there will be some funds in 136 for Airbnb because of the inspections, but it's
I got
not. Most of those are going to be in general fund.
Got it.
But the general fund was impacted by that. The
Right.
136 a little bit. The 136 is also for this current year showing those larger projects. If they don't happen this year, we'll have to, it'll drop off on the reserves and we'll just have to rebudget it.
Mr. Cunningham, come on.
Hi, Scott Cunningham, 2100 North Atlantic Avenue, Cocoa Beach. Ben mentioned it, but I think direction needs to be given, or at least more thought given to the reserves. It just seems in my tenure of coming to these budget meetings for almost a decade now, I've seen the pay-as-you-go get wiped out by occasional and unpredictable multiple storms in a year. And I've also watched, I think it was about 3 years, maybe even 4, before Hurricane Matthew was completely paid for back in 16. And it delayed the City Hall project. The other rainmaker, the other one that year was a rainmaker that basically took down the second sewage facility plant that cost them a whole. I mean, we need reserves, and I remember every CFO has said year after year after year, we should be improving our reserves, and I think we should be, and I don't know why we're not. So I think it needs to be discussed and needs to be addressed. It can't be just sort of, we hope we don't get another hurricane this year. What are we going to do if we do? And discuss it.
And what we can do is we can provide you like what, again, 18%, 19%, 20%. It can be a step-through program. Again, we can pull those funds, automatically commit those, and we reserve those. Those become restricted at that point in time, no different than anything else. So it can be a step-through program. So if we are at 17 this year, we want to change it and move it to 19, then we change the policy, but we can still, the policy can be afterwards. We can still commit the 2%. And then we could change the policy to reflect 19 so that we don't begin the year with the wrong policy and then start using the money. So that would be my other suggestion, that you do make the policy change in September when you adopt your budget, if that's what you wish to do. So we can put those numbers in along with the commissioner's suggestion on the millage rate and just give you some general information.
I'd like the policy change to say that the reserves are truly, that 17, 19%, whatever, it's truly only can be used for unforeseen issues like hurricanes, tidal waves, flooding, a flood event or whatever, and not be tempted to be used as a piggy bank to pull a little extra money out of to cover something else.
We can
I'm
rewrite
on
the
board with
policy.
that.
So I'm good
Especially
with,
now with the banking situation.
yeah, I mean.
And I'm good with raising it to 19%. I mean, ideally, it should be
But if we did,
25, but
if I was gonna support going to 19%, I think we already have 19%.
Currently, yes.
Yes, we already have 19%.
Policy says 17, but yes. 19.
So I'm saying we could raise the policy to 19% put the paperwork together at our next meeting, but then have the policy restrict that money so it can't be used as a piggy bank.
Is the 17% state or is that
So
city?
that's ours, that's your city
So we
policy.
could, all right, so yeah, we could up that.
But I mean, say we could up that and lock it into, lock it in by policy change, and
Yes.
we already have that much in there.
I'm on board.
As long as you have something that states that you'll have a plan, if it falls below, what your direction would be
Well,
and
it
how to
wouldn't fall,
recover.
right, but it wouldn't fall below unless we had the emergency thing.
That's correct.
And then, there's plenty of things that wouldn't be considered emergencies that you could actually pull money out of the reserves for. And if there's something like that came up that was so drastic that we were gonna lose a whole bunch of money by not using a little bit of it, $1, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000, million, then we can always adjust the policy or have a policy waiver in the future, because it would be smarter fiscally to take some money out of there than to not. But a solid policy that says that that's basically untouchable.
We'll take the policy and look at it and then send it over to the legal for review of that.
And everybody's good by consensus on that?
So we're upping the percentage and we're restricting the usage.
Right,
Yeah.
and we already have that percentage in there. So we don't
And if
have
we're
to
close
add
to
more.
20, we'll
We
put
just
20
upped
in
it to
there.
19.
I don't know what the numbers are, so we'll look to see.
Were you saying, Skip, that you can use it above the 19% if you had to?
It's reserves.
Yeah, but,
It's
but you absolutely, you're
the
saying,
warm tummy feeling is you keep that there for if you had a multiple storm year.
yeah,
Or if you had storms this year and you had to spend some of it, and then you're saying, okay, well, FEMA's gonna owe us back that part of that percentage that we lost. And then we had, because it takes 2 years, 3 years to get the money back from FEMA, you had a storm the next year, now you're down to 6% reserves. Because you had 2 back-to-back years with storms, and then you're counting on the money coming back from FEMA, and then if you hit that 3rd year, then all of a sudden you're in big trouble.
We'll bring you options for policies for you to look at. We'll work with legal.
Okay?
Thank you. Anybody else?
Thanks for bringing that up, Peter. Or Mr. Cunningham, I'm sorry, Paul.
Tim Tumbleton, Cocoa Beach. I know you guys aren't voting on any of this yet, so there's time going forward with it. And this is what I'd like for you to potentially use during this time, is to look back historically on what the city has done with respect to rollback, lowering our millage rate or raising the millage rate, and what that's done to the city. Not just the last 5 years, not 10, go back at least 20 to 25 years and see what's happened. I say that because back in 2000, I believe it was 2004, we started rolling it back. When property values started going up, we started rolling it back, and it bit us in the butt. Because we also, then we didn't have any funds going forward. We reduced our police staff considerably over the next 5 to 10 years, as well as our fire department staff, and it put us in a really, really bad place. So you need to really consider going forward and take that consideration by looking at the history of what we've done. That's all I'm going to say. Thanks.
Anybody else? No?
Thank you.
Thank you. Meeting adjourned.